To get my fairy wing shape, I freehanded with a water-soluble pen, a little fairy wing shape that I liked. I didn't really base it off of any distinctive measurements, I just eyeballed it, and once I had a shape I liked, I cut out 4 of them so I could make 2 pairs of wings. Then I took my wings over to my machine and I set my machine to a satin stitch. And I did this all the way around the edge, planning on trimming those little wispy bits that you see once my stitch was done. It was really important to keep my stitches lined up exactly on the edge and follow my curves as neatly as possible. Thankfully, I ran into a strange tension problem while I was sewing. And I say thankfully because I've been waiting for this to happen so I could show you how I do a full machine reset. So you see those awkward little bunchy loops there? That means that there is something wrong with my tension. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my little brush and I'm cleaning out my machine as well as I can and removing lint from my brush every few seconds. Once I've got all the dust cleared out, I'm going to check my bobbin tension. It's threaded correctly and it's hanging just fine, so I'll pop it back in. I checked my upper thread and I found it was almost empty, and sometimes that can cause problems, so I grabbed a fresh new spool. And then I got all of these weirdly aesthetic shots of me threading my machine, as my machine manual recommends it to be threaded. No matter how long you've been sewing, especially on the machine that you're using, it can still be helpful sometimes to go back and reference the manual. 9 times out of 10, if I'm having an odd problem, I find a reference to it either in the manual or on an online forum. I did a quick test swatch on a scrap piece of fabric, and I found that my stitch was working fine again. So I trimmed off the goofy spot, because this fabric is so fragile that any kind of unpicking on it would totally ruin it, and continued on. I'm making these fairy wings for a couple of my husband's friends who have recently had babies. Well, I say recently, but they're both turning 1, so I guess it wasn't that recent. On the first pair of wings I did, I added a little loopy thing in the center. I thought it was a fun decorative touch, but in the end, I didn't really like it all that much. The satin stitch kind of distorted the grain a little bit. For my second pair of wings, I switched my upper thread to this iridescent thread that I forgot that I had. It didn't make a huge difference, but I think it looked a little bit cleaner. Doing curves is actually really satisfying. I just like the challenge of it. While I was sewing this wing, my husband was patiently waiting for me to finish up so that he could install another leg on my sewing table, because it's been drooping lately. As it turns out, sewing machines are heavy. Next, I totally forgot that I was making these fairy wings for 1-year-old babies, and I cut out the length that I would for a normal-sized human, which was an 18-inch stretch of elastic. I also cut out a little square of my iridescent fabric that was basically the width of my overlapped wings, plus seam allowance, plus a little bit of wiggle room. I wet this with some water so that I wouldn't melt my fabric, and then I ironed in a little seam allowance on each edge of my fabric. With really plasticky fabrics like this, you really want to watch how long you're leaving your iron on things, because you don't need very much time to get a really solid crease in, and you don't want to melt anything. Next, I sandwiched my wings and my elastic in my little square, and I made sure to pin each part down specifically so it wouldn't move around on me. Then I sewed all the way around my box. And I did some decorative stitching on top, both for added flourish and to really hold everything together as strongly as possible. Like I said, kids are going to be playing with these, and I want them to hold up as nicely as possible. The little flower stitch that I did wound up getting a little bit distorted. I'm not quite sure why, but in the end it came out looking a little bit like tiny butterflies, so I'm not upset about it. We don't make mistakes in my sewing room. We just have happy accidents. That's a lie, I make mistakes all the time. All in all, I'm happy with how the finished product came out, especially considering the fact that these are really just for children to play with, and they're not, I'm not judging them on the same standard that I would if they were going to go on stage. I think I might want to give this a try again sometime and make them in an adult size so that I can have a pair of my own and maybe make the attachment a little bit more subtle. They're really fun though, and I really enjoyed seeing my little dog Charity model them. She did a really good job showing them off. It was her first time modeling, and I think she did a fantastic job. Don't worry, she was fairly compensated with plenty of scritches and belly rubs. Are you a good model? Are you a good model? Yeah?